The massive ship of the Galactic Evaluation Council hung in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud. It had arrived without warning 3 days ago, causing panic across the planet, until they finally made contact. Now, the leaders of Earth sat in the United Nations chamber, facing the alien representatives with a mixture of fear and curiosity. High Observer Krell stepped forward, his tall blue form towering over the human diplomats. 4 arms crossed over his chest as he spoke, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into English. "We have observed your species for some time now," Krell announced. "As with all emerging civilizations, you must be evaluated before joining the galactic community." The room filled with murmurs. The Secretary General cleared her throat. "What does this evaluation involve?" Krell's mouthparts twitched in what might have been a smile. "A simple survival challenge. All spacefaring races must complete it." A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small planetoid with swirling storms, jagged mountains, and flowing lava fields. "This is Crucible," Krell explained, "an artificial testing ground created by the Council millions of years ago. Your species will establish a colony there and survive its challenges until you have created a fully sustainable presence." "How long does this typically take?" asked the American representative. The fastest completion was by the Orcs Confederation. They required 87 Earth years. Krell's eye membranes flickered with amusement. Most species need between 100 and 150 years. Some fail entirely. The room grew silent as the implications sank in. This would be a multi-generational project. "The challenge begins in 7 days, Krell continued. "You may send as many colonists as you wish. The only rule is that once they arrive, no outside help is permitted until the challenge is completed." The Chinese representative stood up. "And if we refuse this challenge?" Krell's body stiffened. "Then Earth remains quarantined. No interstellar travel. No trade. No protection from the more aggressive species in the galaxy." After the aliens departed, the emergency meeting lasted well into the night. The data package left by the Council revealed the true horror of Crucible. Acid rain that could melt metal. Temperature swings from burning heat to freezing cold in hours. Dangerous radiation bursts. Unstable geology. It was a planet designed to kill. They expect us to send thousands of people on a suicide mission that will take a century. The Russian president slammed his fist on the table. "This is madness." An older man in a worn military uniform spoke up from the back of the room. General Morris had been quiet until now. "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," he said. "They assume we'll approach this like they would with a colony. But humans have always been different." "What are you suggesting?" asked the Secretary General. "Instead of a colony, we send a team. The best of the best. Not to live there for generations, but to solve the problem quickly." "That's impossible," someone argued. "You heard them. The fastest any species has done this is 87 years. General Morris smiled. "Those species aren't human. We've survived on Earth by adapting and overcoming. Give me 1 week to assemble a team. The right team." The room erupted in debate, but something about the general's confidence made the Secretary General raise her hand for silence. "You have 3 days to present your team, General. The fate of humanity's future may depend on it." As the meeting ended, nobody noticed the small monitoring device hidden in the chamber. On the Council ship, Krell watched the humans with amusement. Every species thought they were special. Every species failed to meet their own expectations. Humans would be no different. General Morris stood in the underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching as the final candidates filed into the briefing room. 3 days of worldwide searching had produced this group, 20 of the most exceptional humans on the planet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morris began, his voice echoing in the chamber, "you've all been told this is a matter of global security. What you don't know is that Earth's future depends on what happens in this room today." The screen behind him lit up with images of the alien ship and Crucible. Gasps and whispers filled the room. "Yes, the rumors are true. We have made contact, and now we face a challenge that will determine our place in the galaxy. As Morris explained the situation, he studied their faces. Some showed fear, others excitement. A few remained completely calm. Those were the ones he was watching most closely. We need a team of 6, not to colonize this death trap, but to beat it. To solve problems that other species took decades to figure out. To do in days what they couldn't do in a century. A woman with short gray hair and dark skin raised her hand. "Sir, with respect, that sounds impossible." Morris nodded at her. "Dr. Miller, your research on extreme environments is precisely why you're here. The impossible is exactly what we need." He moved around the table, stopping at each potential team member. Captain Jack Walker, former Navy SEAL with more survival training than anyone in this room. Professor Thomas Reed, quantum physicist who revolutionized energy production. Engineer Maria Rodriguez, who designed water systems that function in the Sahara with minimal resources. Dr. Alex Cooper, the medical genius who developed adaptive medicines. And Ben Fletcher, communications and computer expert who can make technology work under any conditions. The 5 people he named exchanged glances, sizing each other up. "Why only 6 people?" asked Rodriguez. "Wouldn't more hands make the work easier?" "The Council's ship can only transport 6 humans at once," Morris explained. "And we believe a small, focused team will work better than a large group for what we have planned." For the next 8 hours, the candidates underwent tests, simulations, and interviews. They were paired in different combinations, given impossible problems to solve, and pushed to their mental and physical limits. Throughout it all, Morris and his team watched carefully. They weren't just looking for skills, they were looking for the right chemistry. People who could work together under pressure. People who thought differently. Late that night, Morris stood before the final 6. "You leave tomorrow at 600. You'll have 12 hours of prep time on the Council ship before they drop you on Crucible. After that, you're on your own." Captain Walker stepped forward. "What exactly is our mission, sir?" "Survival." Morris shook his head. "Your mission is to complete the challenge in the fastest time possible. Other species colonized and slowly adapted. We want you to hack the system, find shortcuts, exploit loopholes, and do whatever it takes to master that planet." "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Miller. Morris looked at each of them. "The Council expects you to be there for generations. I expect results in days, not years. The faster, the better." Fletcher whistled. "No pressure, then." "One more thing," Morris added, pulling out 6 small metal discs. "These are emergency beacons. If things go badly, activate them, and we'll try to negotiate your return, though it would mean failing the challenge." Walker took his beacon and slipped it into his pocket. "We won't need these." As the team departed to prepare, Dr. Reed stayed behind. "General, do you really believe we can do this? Beat a challenge in days that took others nearly a century?" Morris smiled. "What I believe doesn't matter. But I've watched humans overcome the impossible my entire career. If any species can rewrite the rules of this game, it's us." The transport pod shuddered as it entered Crucible's atmosphere. Inside, the 6 humans checked their equipment one final time. They had spent the 12-hour journey studying every piece of data the Council had provided, looking for patterns and weaknesses in the challenge. 2 minutes to landing, Walker announced, securing his harness. "Remember the plan. First 6 hours are for assessment only. No building, no settling." The Council representatives watching from their orbiting station were puzzled. All previous species had immediately begun constructing shelters upon arrival. These humans seemed to be taking an unusual approach. With a heavy thud, the pod landed on a rocky plateau. The team waited as external sensors checked the air quality. "Oxygen levels low but breathable with our enhancers," Dr. Cooper confirmed, distributing small devices that fit behind their ears. "The atmospheric compound is strange. It changes composition every few hours." As the pod door opened, they got their first real look at Crucible. The sky burned orange with two small suns. In the distance, mountains belched black smoke. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. "Spread out, stay within communication range," Walker ordered. Miller, analyze soil and plant samples. Rodriguez, find water sources. Reed, map the energy fluctuations. Cooper, monitor our biological responses to this environment. Fletcher, set up the sensor grid and start scanning for artificial structures. "What are you going to do, Captain?" Fletcher asked, shouldering his equipment. "I'm going hunting," Walker replied, picking up a specialized scanner. "This planet was designed by someone. Everything here has a purpose. I want to know what that purpose is." On the council ship, High Observer Krell watched the humans with growing curiosity. "They are not following standard procedures," he noted to his assistant. "No species has ever delayed shelter construction." "Perhaps they do not understand the danger," the assistant suggested. Krell's eye membranes narrowed. "Or perhaps they understand something we do not." Back on the surface, the team worked with remarkable efficiency. Instead of struggling against the harsh environment, they were studying it, mapping it, understanding it. Dr. Miller carefully collected samples from different areas, analyzing them in portable equipment. "The soil composition changes every 100 meters or so," she reported over the comm. "It's not random, it's a pattern. Like someone created different biozones deliberately." Meanwhile, Rodriguez had found 3 water sources, each with different properties. The western spring is acidic, the northern one alkaline, and the eastern one has traces of rare minerals. They're perfectly balanced to create a chemical equation. Professor Reed's energy readings showed similar patterns. The magnetic fields are artificial. They're generating power in a specific sequence. If we could tap into it. 4 hours into the mission, Fletcher had completed the sensor grid. "I've got something unusual. There's a network of tunnels under the entire plateau, and I'm detecting power signatures that don't match anything in our database." Walker, who had been exploring the perimeter, returned with more discoveries. "This isn't just a survival test. It's a puzzle. Everything here is connected. The weather patterns, the geological formations, even the way the light hits the surface at different times of day." Dr. Cooper nodded. "Even our biological readings show it. Our bodies are responding to something beyond the obvious environmental factors. It's like the planet is testing us." The team gathered at the pod to share their findings. While other species had treated Crucible as a hostile environment to be conquered through brute force and persistence, the humans were treating it as a complex system to be understood. "We don't need to fight this planet," Walker said, looking at the data they'd collected. "We need to solve it." On the council ship, Krell watched with growing alarm as the humans compiled their findings. In just 6 hours, they had gathered more useful data than most species collected in their first year. They are not approaching this as colonists, Krell realized. They are approaching it as problem solvers. For the first time in his long career as an observer, Krell felt something unexpected. Uncertainty about the outcome. "They've been there for 6 hours and haven't built even a basic shelter," grumbled council member Draz, his scaled skin flushing with irritation. "The night cycle begins in less than an hour. The temperature will drop to freezing levels." Krell said nothing, watching the screens carefully. The human team had returned to their landing pod and appeared to be building something, but not shelters. They were constructing small devices about the size of their hands. "What are they doing?" Draz demanded. "I don't know," Krell admitted. "This is unexpected." Down on Crucible, Walker gathered the team around a makeshift table in the pod. Outside, the first sun was setting, and the temperature was already beginning to fall. "All right, time to implement Phase 2, Walker said. "Reed, explain your theory." The professor pointed to a 3D map they had created. "The magnetic field readings show a pattern. Every 3 hours, energy bursts travel through these lines." He traced glowing paths across the map. "If we can tap into this network, we can draw power directly from the planet. Most species take decades to discover this, Rodriguez added. They waste years building and rebuilding shelters that get destroyed by storms. Fletcher held up one of the small devices they had assembled. These energy collectors will insert into the ground at specific points. They'll draw power and feed it back to our central hub. And I've mapped the storm patterns, Miller explained. They're not random. They follow a mathematical sequence. With the right calculations, we can predict exactly when and where they'll hit. Walker nodded. That's where these come in. He held up another set of devices. Weather disruptors. Placed in the right locations, they'll create counterpressures in the atmosphere and redirect the storms away from our position. Dr. Cooper looked concerned. Even with all this, the radiation bursts could still be deadly. That's why you've been developing the adaptive meds, Walker reminded him. How's that coming? Cooper held up a small injector. I've analyzed how the radiation affects our cells. This compound should help our bodies adapt faster. Most species evolve natural resistance over generations. We're just speeding up the process. Walker checked the time. We have 40 minutes until nightfall. Let's move. The team split up, racing to install their devices at strategic points across the plateau. Fletcher stayed in the pod, coordinating their movements through the sensor grid he had established. On the council ship, the aliens watched in confusion. What are those devices? Draz asked, leaning closer to the screen. I'm not sure, Krull replied. But they appear to be. He was interrupted as the first of the energy collectors activated. A visible pulse of blue light traced through the ground in a perfect geometric pattern, connecting all the devices. In the pod, lights flickered on as power began flowing. Impossible, Draz exclaimed. They've tapped into the planet's energy grid. Most species take at least 30 years to discover that possibility. Walker and the team regrouped at the pod just as darkness fell. The temperature plummeted, but inside, their newly powered heating system kept them comfortable. Storm approaching from the west, Fletcher announced, watching his sensors. Impact in 3 minutes. They waited tensely as the howling winds grew closer. The storm clouds rolled toward them, crackling with lightning, and then suddenly split, flowing around their position like water around a rock. Weather disruptors functioning at 92% efficiency, Miller reported with a smile. We'll need to adjust the northern one slightly. Do it quickly, Walker ordered. We need to move on to Phase 3 before the radiation cycle begins at dawn. On the council ship, the observation room had filled with additional members, all watching in stunned silence. This is unprecedented, Krell stated. They're not just surviving the challenges. They're neutralizing them entirely. A senior council member spoke from the back of the room. Could they actually complete the challenge in days rather than decades? Impossible, Draz scoffed. Even if they solve these initial problems, the extinction phase is programmed to begin after 3 days. No species has ever survived it with fewer than 70% casualties. Krull wasn't so sure anymore. These humans, they don't think like other species. On Crucible, the team was already planning their next move, unaware of the growing audience watching their progress with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. Tomorrow, Walker told his team, we take control of this planet. 18 hours into the challenge, the council observation room was in chaos. What had begun as a routine evaluation had turned into something unprecedented, drawing observers from across the ship. They're progressing too quickly, Draz argued, pounding his clawed hand on the console. We must activate the extinction phase now. Krell shook his head. The protocols are clear. The extinction phase begins at the 72-hour mark. By then, they may have mastered the entire system. Draz's voice rose to a screech. Look at what they've accomplished already. On the screens, the human team had transformed their landing zone. Energy collectors now formed a wide perimeter, powering a field that regulated temperature and filtered air. Water purification systems extracted moisture from the atmosphere. They had even begun growing test crops in specialized containers. using soil samples rich in nutrients. "I've never seen such rapid adaptation," murmured an elder council member. The Morax took 15 years to achieve stable food production. Suddenly, alarms blared across the observation deck. One of the junior technicians looked up in panic. "High observer. One of the humans is accessing the planetary control systems." "Impossible." Krell rushed to the screen. "The control interfaces are hidden beneath the core mountains. No species has ever located them before." But the evidence was clear. On the surface, Fletcher sat cross-legged on a rock outcropping, surrounded by portable equipment. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces as he worked to bypass security protocols that had remained untouched for millennia. "What is he doing?" Draz demanded. "He appears to be." The technician paused in disbelief. "He's attempting to hack the planet." Down on Crucible, Fletcher's concentration was intense as he worked through layer after layer of alien code. "How's it coming?" Walker asked through the comm. "It's like nothing I've ever seen before," Fletcher replied, not looking up from his work. "But code is code, no matter who wrote it. I'm in the basic operational systems. There's something big scheduled to happen at the 72-hour mark." "The extinction phase," Walker said. Council records mentioned it but gave no details. "Well, I'm looking at the details now." Fletcher's voice grew grim. "Massive seismic activity, toxic gas release, radiation storms. It's designed to wipe out most of a colony, leaving only the strongest to rebuild." Dr. Cooper, who had been monitoring their vital signs, joined the conversation. "We can't survive that kind of assault, even with our adaptations." "We won't have to," Fletcher replied. "I think I can disable it." On the council ship, the observation room erupted into angry debate. "This is cheating," Draz shouted. "No species is allowed to tamper with the Crucible's programming." "There is nothing in the rules prohibiting it," Krell countered, though he too was disturbed. "The challenge is to master the planet. They are simply doing so through means no other species considered." "We should stop them now," another council member suggested. "Terminate the test." "And admit these humans have defeated a challenge that has stood for millions of years," Krell asked. "The diplomatic implications would be severe." Back on Crucible, a new crisis emerged. Despite the team's preparations, an unexpected radiation burst had penetrated their defenses. Dr. Cooper rushed to treat Rodriguez, who had been exposed while adjusting the Western energy collectors. "Her cellular degradation is accelerating," Cooper reported, injecting her with his adaptive medicine. "The radiation is stronger than our initial readings suggested." "We need to move faster," Walker decided. "Reed, Miller, accelerate the terraforming preparations. Cooper, stay with Rodriguez. Fletcher, how close are you to accessing full system control?" "I need maybe 2 more hours," Fletcher answered, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cooling unit beside him. "You have one," Walker replied. "The planet's fighting back harder now. It knows what we're doing." In the council ship, Krell watched with a mixture of alarm and admiration. No species had ever pushed the Crucible to adapt its own defenses. The planet-sized testing ground was actually increasing the difficulty, something that typically happened over decades as colonies expanded. "They're treating it like an opponent rather than an environment," Krell observed. "And somehow, they're winning." Draz stormed out of the observation room, heading for the council chambers. "I will seek authorization to terminate this test immediately," he hissed. Krell barely noticed his departure, too fascinated by the human's approach. After millions of years observing species face this challenge, he was witnessing something entirely new. "I wonder," he whispered to himself, "if we have been underestimating them all along." 22 hours into the challenge, the council's grand chamber had never been so full. Members from every department crowded around the viewing screens, watching events unfold on Crucible with mounting disbelief. "This test has become a mockery," Draz shouted, addressing the Grand Council. 7 ancient beings sat in elevated seats, their species diverse but their expressions uniformly troubled. The humans are not merely surviving the challenge, they're dismantling it. On the main screen, Fletcher had successfully penetrated the planet's central control systems. With access to the code, the team had accelerated their plans dramatically. Rodriguez, recovered from her radiation exposure, was now helping Reed install devices at key points across the landscape. Grand observers, I request immediate termination of this evaluation. Draz continued. The humans are using methods that violate the spirit of the challenge. The eldest council member, a crystalline being named Vox, leaned forward. Has any rule been broken, specifically? Krell, standing at the observation console, answered carefully. No, Honored One. The challenge parameters state only that the species must master Crucible without outside assistance. The methods are not specified, but they're changing the planet itself. Draz protested. Look. The screen showed massive changes occurring across Crucible's surface. Areas that had been barren were blooming with engineered plant life. The volatile weather patterns had stabilized. Even the toxic zones were being neutralized by machines the humans had built from materials they found on the planet. Fascinating, murmured Vox. They are not adapting to the planet. They are making the planet adapt to them. On Crucible, Walker stood with his team at their base camp, reviewing their progress. Fletcher, status report, he ordered. All systems under our control, Fletcher replied, his eyes red from hours of concentration. I've disabled the extinction phase completely. The planet can't hurt us now. Miller looked up from her soil samples. The terraforming is proceeding faster than expected. The engineered bacteria are multiplying exponentially. Within hours, they'll have converted enough of the atmosphere to make breathing possible without enhancers. Food production, Walker asked. The accelerated crops will be ready in about 2 hours, Rodriguez answered. I set up 5 different growing zones, each optimized for different nutrients. Dr. Cooper checked his medical scanner. Our bodies have fully adapted to the radiation thanks to the medicine. Our vital signs are stronger here now than they were on Earth. Professor Reed smiled tiredly. And I've reconfigured the energy grid to create a sustainable power system that will run for centuries without maintenance. Walker looked around at his exhausted but triumphant team. Then I believe we're done. He reached for his communication device, a direct line to the council ship that was meant for emergencies only. No species had ever used it to declare completion. In the council chambers, a soft alarm sounded. Krell looked down at his console in shock. High observers, the humans are contacting us. The room fell silent as Walker's voice filled the chamber. Council representatives, this is Captain Jack Walker of Earth. My team has achieved sustainable living conditions on Crucible. All survival challenges have been neutralized. We formally declare the evaluation complete and request verification. For several moments, no one spoke. Then Vox rose from his seat, his crystalline form catching the light. This is unprecedented, he stated. The fastest completion before this was 87 years. They claimed success in less than 1 Earth day. It's impossible, Draz insisted. They must have cheated somehow. Send a verification team, Vox ordered. We must confirm their claims before making judgment. Within the hour, a small shuttle descended to Crucible's surface. 3 council inspectors in protective suits emerged, expecting to find exaggerated claims and partial solutions. Instead, they found a transformed environment. The air was breathable. The temperature was pleasant. Plants were growing in soil that had been toxic just hours before. Energy flowed freely from a grid that had taken other species decades to understand. The lead inspector scanned everything twice, unable to believe the readings. Finally, she contacted the council ship. High observers, she reported, her voice shaking slightly. I confirm the humans' claim. By all measurement standards, they have completed the challenge. In the council chamber, the debate turned from disbelief to concern. If they can do this in a day, one member whispered, what else are they capable of? Krell watched the humans on the screen, standing together as they awaited the council's verdict. They looked tired but proud, unaware of the storm of controversy they had created. "The question," Krell said quietly, "is not whether they passed the test. It's whether our test was adequate to measure them at all." The Grand Council chamber fell silent as the final vote was cast. After hours of heated debate, the decision was unanimous, though reluctant from many members. Vox rose from his ancient seat, his crystalline form glowing with internal light. "Let the record show that the species known as humans have completed the Crucible Challenge in 24 Earth hours," he announced formally. This achievement stands as the fastest completion in galactic history. Murmurs spread through the chamber as Krell prepared the official transmission to Earth. The message would reach the United Nations within minutes, forever changing humanity's place in the cosmos. On Crucible, Walker and his team were packing up their equipment when the communication alert sounded. Fletcher activated the holographic display, and the blue form of Krell appeared before them. "Captain Walker," Krell began, his tone carefully neutral, "the Council has verified your completion of the challenge. Transport will arrive within the hour to return you to Earth." Walker nodded. "Thank you, High Observer." Krell hesitated before continuing. "I am curious. Did your leaders expect this outcome when they sent you?" Walker exchanged glances with his team. "They hoped, but I don't think anyone truly expected it. We were prepared to stay for months if necessary. Yet you completed a century's challenge in a day." Krell's eye membranes flickered rapidly. "How?" Dr. Miller stepped forward. "You designed this planet as a test of adaptation over generations, but humans have always solved problems differently. We work best under pressure," Rodriguez added. "When faced with impossible situations, we find shortcuts. And we work together," Reed said. "Each of us has different skills, but together we become something greater than the sum of our parts." Krell seemed to consider this. Most species approach the challenge as colonists, planning for the long term. "You approached it as problem solvers," Fletcher finished. "We saw Crucible as a puzzle to be solved, not just an environment to endure." "The Council has many questions about your methods," Krell admitted. "Some believe you have broken the test." Walker smiled slightly. "We didn't break your rules. We just changed the game." As the team returned to Earth, they were unaware of the ripple effects already spreading across the galaxy. News of the humans' achievement traveled faster than light through the interstellar communication network. Species that had previously dismissed Earth as an unimportant backwater suddenly took keen interest. In the halls of power on 100 worlds, urgent meetings were called. Military assessments were updated. Diplomatic strategies were revised. Some civilizations began preparing welcoming gifts. Others strengthened their borders. 1 month later, the United Nations Great Hall was packed for a special session. The team from Crucible sat in a place of honor as the Secretary General addressed the Assembly. "Today marks a new chapter in human history," she announced. "Since Captain Walker's team completed the Galactic Challenge, 17 alien civilizations have requested diplomatic relations with Earth. Trade agreements are being negotiated with 5 more. The Council has formally invited us to send representatives to the Galactic Assembly." Applause filled the hall, but General Morris, sitting beside Walker, remained serious. "There's more happening than they're telling us," he said quietly. "Some species are frightened by what we did." Walker nodded. "Krell told me before we left. The Council is already designing a new challenge, one they think will take us longer to solve." "How long do they expect it to take?" Morris asked. Walker smiled. "They're hoping for at least a month." In the far reaches of the galaxy, on worlds humans had yet to discover, news of the Earth's achievement continued to spread. Ancient species that had ignored the affairs of younger civilizations for millennia now turned their attention toward the small blue planet. "These humans solve problems differently," became a common phrase in diplomatic circles, usually spoken with a mixture of respect and concern. On the Council ship, now orbiting a distant star, Krell reviewed the data from Crucible one final time before filing his report. The humans had not just completed the challenge, they had rendered it obsolete. The test that had evaluated species for millions of years would never be used again. As he prepared to transmit his findings, Krell added a personal note to the official record. The galaxy has always classified civilizations by their technology, their age, or their reach. Perhaps we should have been measuring their creativity all along. If so, humanity may already be among the most advanced species we have ever encountered.